This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
First batch of over 600 Nigerians living in South Africa to return home Wednesday. Concern over worsening security situation in Burkina Faso. On World Suicide Prevention Day, we look at efforts to tackle rising rates of suicide in Africa. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Cyril Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague, Uche, who has our business headlines.
Thanks, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's cash-strapped carrier begins to cut flights due to a pilot shortage. And ratings agency Moody's delays a credit downgrade for South Africa. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Let's start in South Africa, and the West African nation of Nigeria will begin repatriating its citizens from the country on Wednesday. 2 planes belonging to Nigerian carrier Air Peace will take the first group of returnees to Nigeria. Officials say 600 Nigerians in South Africa have registered to return home following xenophobic violence. CGTN's Angela Coppola reports of plans to airlift Nigerians out of South Africa.
Many Nigerians have made South Africa their home. Some have been here for more than a decade.
I'm not giving up to going back, but because of the condition, so that's why. So I'm not changing mind to go back, but at least I want life to be okay here. But I will rise, I will come down in the country.
Others aren't feeling that confident that the situation will be resolved anytime soon.
It's unfortunate that the South African people, they started developing xenophobic attitude toward foreigners living in their country. But by and large, what I would like to say is that they must try as much as possible to understand that destruction of property, valuable things will never solve whatever grievances they have against the foreigners.
Many people have lost everything and have nowhere to turn. Too scared to return home, they sleep outside the consulate, waiting to be repatriated.
Like where I stay in Joburg Street, is not comfortable there for the foreigners. Everybody is running helter-skelter. We don't have peace. The people that fellow tenants that are Zulus that are staying in your compound, they call the xenophobian guys. They come and set you up. They beat you up. They take your phones. They took my phone. They took my money. They chased me from the house.
Others are running for their lives and their families.
Yeah, I'm going home because of this xenophobia, what the South Africa people they are doing to us. It's not fair. The little business we are doing, they break into our shop, they burn it. Even my husband's garage, his physical and he's selling car. They burn all his car. Nowhere to go. Even all my luggage. They steal everything, even my money. I don't have any place to go. I'm just stranded. So I'm tired. I said, let me just go back to my country.
While the Nigerian government is suggesting there's some 600 people who are interested in going back home, that number is going to grow every day, especially if there are any more attacks or there are any more people here that feel threatened or under risk. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The United Nations has announced that hundreds of African refugees trapped in Libyan detention centers will be evacuated to Rwanda within the next few weeks. This is part of increasingly urgent efforts to relocate people as conflict rages in the North African nation. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala has more.
Libya is a transit country for thousands of African migrants trying to reach Europe. Many who have been unsuccessful in their journey have been trapped in detention centers here. The European Union and the UN Refugee Agency have been working to evacuate them.
This morning in Addis Ababa, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, with the government of Rwanda and the African Union, we have signed an MOU and a memorandum of understanding to set up a transit mechanism for evacuating refugees out of Libya. Under this agreement, the government of Rwanda will receive and provide protection to refugees and asylum seekers who are currently being held in detention centers in Libya.
Under the Rwandan deal, refugees will be airlifted to Rwanda in groups of about 50.
Rwanda will give enough time for this process, for these refugees to be given the opportunity to be resettled in European countries, or to be given the opportunity of going back to their countries of origin if they think it is safe for them to go back, or even an African country they want to settle in. So the options also are open, and they have many options, and they have even the option, if they want to settle in Rwanda, they can request it through the authorities of Rwanda.
We are saying that we are ready to receive the initial batch of 500, as Commissioner said. Though the MOU covers 3,000, but Rwanda will receive 500 at a time, such that we can have enough time to prepare for them, and even our partners and under the leadership of the AU can come and follow up and make sure that things are as they are supposed to be.
Evacuation is on a voluntary basis, and priority will be given to the most vulnerable, such as unaccompanied children, disabled people, and the elderly. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
The International Committee of the Red Cross is raising concerns over the deteriorating situation in Burkina Faso. The humanitarian agency says the country has been slipping into violence, which has displaced about 270,000 people. The worsening situation is also threatening health care for at least 500,000 people. CGTN's Jane Keogh has more.
The past few years have seen violent activities rise sharply in Burkina Faso. The volatile situation has been worsened by a spillover of jihadist violence from neighboring Mali. Over 100 health centers have been forced to close down across the country.
When she collapsed, a friend called me. By the time I arrived, she was already unconscious. I decided to take her to the health center, and luckily someone who had a motorcycle helped me. Because of the violence, many people who are sick wait at home and die.
This is one of the few health centers that isn't closed. We don't have enough equipment though, and the insecurity has caused huge anxiety amongst health workers. Even coming here is a huge challenge because the route is so dangerous.
The International Committee of the Red Cross is sounding an alarm on the challenges affecting the country.
We also see that it's not only the violence that is affecting the country, it's also underdevelopment and climate change. Together with the violence that is obstructing the health services, it's an accumulation of factors.
On Monday, a group of officers was ambushed by armed individuals in the north. The incident came a day after the government said 29 civilians had been killed in 2 attacks on Sunday in the northern province of San Mantenga. President Rochmark Christian Kabore has condemned the incident. He says it will not go unpunished. Jin Keo, CGTN.
Staying in West Africa, and Cameroonian President Paul Biya is expected to address the nation in the coming few hours. The announcement comes as a surprise, as the president rarely speaks to the nation outside of the traditional New Year's address and the National Youth Day on the 11th of February. People have been speculating about the likely focus of the speech. For more on this, we are joined by Eugene Fongwa, a local journalist in Yaoundé. Let's take a listen.
It's really everyone's guess that the president might be addressing the crisis affecting the country, which is the separatist movement in the Anglophone part of the country that has shut down that part of the country for 3 years running. Schools have again failed to resume in that part of the country in spite of government efforts to ensure that that was the case. But also, there's been some serious political turmoil with Maurice Kamto of the opposition party, who claims to have won the election, which has also not gone away. Just this week, Maurice Kamto was again in jail, and there is still a pending sentence on his case. So these are the two things that many Cameroonians expect the president to discuss. But also, the country is really in a state of the country is really not in a state of ease. The economy is struggling. There have been a number of social challenges. Just 2 weeks ago, lawyers throughout the country announced that they were going on strike because they were being arrested and not being given access to their clients. So all of these things, I think the president would want to touch on them. But again, it's only a guess because no one really knows what this speech is intended to address.
The Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry has flown to the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, to show solidarity for the newly formed cabinet. CGTN's Adel El Maroui with more.
As soon as the Sudanese cabinet took oath, Egypt has sent its foreign minister to congratulate. Shoukry is the first official to visit Khartoum as the new cabinet begins the transitional roadmap. During his meetings there, he offered Cairo's full support and assistance.
This visit reflects Egypt's blessing and support to the transition in Sudan, which is a crucial step for the most important country to Egypt. It's a direct neighbor with many mutual benefits to Cairo. Egypt has to be among the first congratulators. Egypt can provide a lot to Sudan. In the short term, it can help speed up the electricity connectivity projects, which will help reduce the current power cuts in Sudan.
Cairo has been seen collaborating with President Omar al-Bashir and after him with the Transitional Military Council that has made Egypt somewhat unpopular among the civil powers.
Cairo has stressed that it stands on equal distances from all Sudanese powers, and it has hosted many of them for talks. Egypt seeks to start a new page of relations. It has been criticized for its ties with the former regime, which Cairo didn't have any choice in. Now, there is a new era, and Egypt is looking forward to partner up with this new administration.
Egypt and Sudan have signed agreements to complement their economies. Projects of connecting their electricity networks, railroads, and free border movements have all been frozen when the unrest broke.
During his first meeting with Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry has vowed that Egypt will do its best to help in lifting Sudan's name out of the state-sponsoring terror list. Egypt is extending its hand to its southern neighbor, hoping to make an ally of the newly formed authorities in Khartoum. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The Algerian Prime Minister Noureddine Badoui will give up his post to facilitate holding of elections later this year. Badoui's resignation is one of the key demands of the protesters who in April forced longtime President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to step down. The presidential elections had been scheduled for July, but has since been postponed. In the past few weeks, authorities have made concessions by arresting more prominent figures linked to Bouteflika on corruption charges, while increasing the pressure on protesters with tougher policing.
I would like to begin by paying my respects to President Bouteflika, as well as thanking him for the precious trust that he has put in me. God willing, I will work hard to reach his level. I would also like to give special greetings to His Excellency, the Prime Minister, and a good brother, as well as to congratulate him on all his efforts in service to Algeria. Algeria is at a very special moment in its history. Algeria and its people are waiting to see the realization of all the ambitions expressed in the past weeks. These ambitions are also at the forefront of the new reforms to be witnessed soon by every Algerian, especially its youth.
You're watching Africa Live. The news continues. Let's take a look at the headlines coming up. On World Suicide Prevention Day, how is Africa tackling the rising rates of suicide in the continent? And in Kenya, worsening drought puts millions at risk of starvation.
For looking at economic details of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. As the world commemorates the World Suicide Prevention Day, the World Health Organization is shining a spotlight on global suicide rates. It says suicide happens every 40 seconds globally. For those between the ages of 15 and 29, suicide is the second leading cause of death. In Africa, the figures are equally staggering, but Lesotho has the highest rates. Experts in the continent say a lack of professional help and research into its causes is also a challenge.
There are an estimated 800,000 deaths from suicide in the world every year, and this translates to about one death every 40 seconds globally.
Well, let's get more on this. We are joined live in studio by Dr. Chitai Murabula, a clinical psychiatrist. Doctor, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. You heard the statistics. Is that an exaggerated statistic? 40 suicides a second? And can you illuminate the situation here in Kenya?
Yes, these are, in my opinion, probably underestimate, because if you look at the figure of 800,000 deaths per year, this figure has been almost constant from the year 2000 to present. However, when you look at countries like Kenya, the reported numbers of people die by suicide every year have doubled over the last 10 years, such that currently about 421 deaths occur every year in Kenya. And we also think that this can be underestimated because there's no quality data and processes for reporting suicide, because suicide arises from mental illness. Mental illness is highly stigmatized, and also in terms of the legal status of suicide is that suicide is an illegal behavior, so to say, unfortunately. And so you find that families will not readily report first suicide attempts because it will land them in trouble, and secondly, the deaths bring shame to the family.
Right. Doctor, let's touch on this a little more. What are some of the misconceptions about the causes of suicide in Kenya?
Yes, many misconceptions. One is culturally, suicide is believed to be caused by maybe family curses. And because people observe, what happens is that when one person in a family commits suicide or dies of suicide, you find that over time, there could be others. And this itself, it is because a person in a family will share genetics with the other family members. They'll also be in the same environment, so there is social learning, there's modeling. You know, basically, if you are in a family where someone has died of suicide, that affects you, and there's a form of learning from it, and it brings distress. And therefore, that has caused over time people to imagine or to think wrongly that suicide is a curse. There are also issues with the maybe religion. If you look at it, sometimes you find that you'll have religious groups discriminating families where persons have died of suicide because they actually think that that this is has something to do with their spiritual origins, and so these are some of the, and also about the individual. People think that when someone talks about suicide, when they express that suicidal intent, people tend to think that this person is simply seeking for attention. Perhaps they are displaying weakness that they should not display, especially where men are involved. It becomes a little difficult because, you know, expressing that, you know, it's shown, you know, it's thought that it's shameful. And therefore, these are some of the misconceptions. And the true position is that suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts develop as a result of mental illness. And because over 95% of people who commit suicide have been shown to have an underlying mental illness. Therefore, if we can provide mental health services, then we will not have as many cases of suicide, because suicide is preventable.
All right.
Yes.
Well, doctor, you're a psychiatrist. Here's the magic question. Yes. What can be done to help those suffering from depression? And let's talk about how you can break the stigma of suicide in African society as well.
Yes. Stigma develops mostly out of lack of knowledge, and therefore we must increase the level of education in our communities. Starting at the family level, there should be more discussions at the family level about mental health. In our schools, change of curriculum so that teachers can provide counseling to students just the way they provide physical education. At the workplaces, there should be a culture of people discussing about mental problems, and also psychosocial support at the workplace. A few at the workplaces that have proper psychosocial support for staff that need this, and that's something that should be addressed. At the community level, we are talking about discussions within our religious organizations, within investment groups that people have. They should discuss these issues as well. And at the government level, it's very important that once we acknowledge, and we must acknowledge that suicidal behavior develops out of mental illness, then we must develop an infrastructure that addresses mental illness. A good example being that in Kenya, for example, out of the 3,956 health facilities, only 29, which is like 0.7% of the facilities, provide mental health services. So there's a lot more that the government can do that will have high impact, especially in terms of improving mental health services, so that the person who is depressed, they'll have a place to go. They'll have a hospital to go, and when they go there, they'll find a professional trained enough to deal with that, to give them the help they need.
All right, Dr. Chitai Marabula, thank you for your insight. Thank you for your expertise. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah. Moving on, Kenya's drought and food security situation continues to deteriorate. According to the latest figures from the country's National Drought Management Authority, 2.6 million people are currently facing acute food shortages. From Turkana, one of the worst affected regions, CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy has this report.
Kenya faces a new humanitarian crisis with 2.6 million people reportedly threatened by severe hunger. Those in need of relief assistance has more than doubled from 1.1 million in February this year, with the number expected to rise above 3 million people by October. At least 11 counties have been affected as the drought and hunger situation gets worse. Selina Aripon is a 25-year-old mother of 4 and a resident of Akwanya village in Lodwar. Her family is among thousands of people currently trying to cope with the devastating effects of climate change. Sitting in the shade of a tree with her family, Aripon struggles to weave brooms to make ends meet. Aripon earns less than $1 for a day's work, laboring for her children's survival. Much of our proceeds is spent on food and other necessities for our family.
I try my best to buy food for my children out of what I earn. I also use part of my savings as hospital bills when my children get sick, pay school fees and also buy some clothes for myself.
A few kilometers from Akwanya, a group of 30 women have come together under the Kakwanyang Women Group to save money for emergencies and basic needs in an attempt to avert the devastating effects of the raging hunger. But these women can only do so much.
My role is to help them, or now they save this money. My role is to record them. My role is to teach them that this is the way to go with the business, the way to capture the anger.
This group of 30 women are the beacon of hope, not just in Kakwanyang, a community close to Lodwar town in Turkana County, but beyond. The largest saving this day was $9, but the women are free to take out loans from this pool, depending on their immediate needs. This is not just a dry spell. Between March and June, rainfall reached less than half the average rate. Many of these women have seen their harvests run down by delayed rains, rendering them helpless. The United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund's recent allocation of $5 million to complement Kenya's hunger safety net program could bring a ray of hope to many, since it targets mainly parts of the arid and semi-arid regions of Kenya, which are hard hit by drought. Hundreds of thousands of people in Kenya's Turkana County remain in dire need of humanitarian assistance due to the prolonged drought that has left many in need of food. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Lodwar, Kenya.
A World Bank study shows that coastal erosion in Côte d'Ivoire is costing millions of dollars in lost revenue. It also threatens to cause immeasurable damage unless immediate action is taken. As CGTN's Tuli Shabalala reports, those suffering the most are the local coastal populations that are losing their homes, livelihoods, and even ancestral burying grounds.
Residents of the town of Lahore Panda are painfully watching as remains of their ancestors drift out to sea from cemeteries. This is due to the unwavering coastal erosion going on in Côte d'Ivoire.
Today we live in anguish. What will happen tomorrow if no one comes to the aid of the village? We will disappear. But today it's our dead who are leaving. You know, in Africa, our parents and our ancestors are very important to us, and to see them scattered in the sea is heartbreaking. And every day that God brings to us, we are haunted.
The land in this area is receding at an average of 1 to 2 meters a year, and a loss of 10 meters over a period of just 2 days in 2011. This has posed a huge threat to the population.
We live here, but since the sea was threatening our home, we did not know what to do, so we took off and we went to the other side of the village.
Over the years, a hospital, police station and the regional school have all gone underwater.
The old city of Grand Lahore cannot be on the UNESCO's Natural Heritage List. It doesn't exist anymore. Some time back, they raised their alarm to see what could be done with part of the city. But all these historical buildings are now gone.
In its report, the World Bank says the West African nation is mostly affected by floods and coastal degradation. It calculated the economic cost to the country at $2 billion for 2017. Very little beyond carrying out studies has been done since then. The local population feels abandoned by the government.
What you need to do in the Grand Lahore is to plug the breach at the level of the cemetery, open up in front of Bandama River so that the water can then flow there, and put things in place dams so the water does not snake around. That the water instead goes straight into the sea. That is what needs to be done. That's all. It's feasible. Technically, it is feasible. It is just a question of costs.
In Abidjan, coastal erosion and climate change is threatening major economic infrastructures too. A United Nations environment expert says the Atlantic-facing African nations will need between $400 and $450 billion to solve the coastal degradation problem. Many are in talks with the European Union and the African Development Bank to get funding. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the mission of the People's Republic of China to the African Union and the Center for Dialogue, Research and Cooperation has jointly held a seminar in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, under the theme Sustaining Traditional Friendship. The seminar sought to celebrate the gains achieved between the cooperation between China and Africa. The two sides further agreed to build a comprehensive strategic and cooperative partnership.
In the seminar, we addressed and reviewed our cooperation in the past years. And we also discussed the achievements reached at the FOCAC summit in Beijing. We also discussed our implementation of the 8 initiatives. And most of the African participants say they have achieved tremendous transformation in the past century.
China has proven to be a real partner and a true friend to all, a strategic partner and a true friend to all African countries. Egypt is fully committed to this strategic partnership and will continue to do so after, of course, concluding the chairmanship of the Union. The sky is the limit. We still look for deeper and wider cooperation with China in Africa. The sky is the limit. We're very much happy to see that China has cared to build us a very nice tower in the African Union, but this should not be the end.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Time now for our business with Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya's cash-strapped carrier begins to cut flights due to a pilot shortage. And ratings agency Moody's delays a credit downgrade for South Africa.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Kenya. The country's national carrier, Kenya Airways, says it has been forced to cut flights following a shortage of pilots costing about $50 million a year. Now, the loss-making airline requires an additional 62 pilots to the current 435 pilots. The cash-strapped airline is at loggerheads with the Kenyan Airline Pilots Association over pay, training and aviator nationality. The director of operations at the carrier, Paul Njoroge, says the labor dispute is stifling recruitment. Now, according to CALPA, the employment of foreigners goes against the hiring of jobless pilots in Kenya. Sub-Saharan Africa's third largest airline has accrued losses estimated at $77.7 million, and that's due to years of weak financial performance and competition from regional rival Ethiopian airlines. Meanwhile, Somalia's economy is projected to expand by 2.9% in 2019, up from about 2.8% last year. Now, according to the World Bank, this is dependent on current economic reform momentum in the country. After turmoil since 1991, Somalia has since achieved a stable government. Economic reforms being implemented have seen tax collection increase by about 29%. The World Bank now projects projects a growth pace of up to 3.5% in the medium term. However, Somalia still remains at a risk from fragile security, effects of climate change, and widespread poverty. The government is still unable to meet costs of its expenditure. In May, the International Monetary Fund gave the President, Mohamed Farmajo's administration a pat on the back, saying the country's economy is on the right track. And credit ratings firm Moody's has delayed downgrading South Africa's ranking, instead giving it a stable outlook. Now, analysts had anticipated a rating downgrade from the agency. Moody's has, however, cut growth projections from 1% to 0.7% this year. A downgrade would have pushed up borrowing costs at a time that the government is seeking to bail out strategic state enterprises. They include power utility Eskom and South Africa Airlines. Now, Moody's is among the 3 ratings firms that still rank South Africa's debt at investment grade. Africa's most developed economy recorded a better than expected growth of 3.1% in the second quarter. Moody's next review is expected in November after the finance minister tables his medium-term budget statement. Now, after xenophobic attacks in South Africa led to the death of about 12 people and the closure of several foreign-owned businesses across the country, local businesses with operations across the continent have been caught up in retaliatory attacks, especially in Nigeria. In response to restoring peace and diplomatic ties, several high-level meetings taking place in South Africa to find a solution to the recent xenophobic attacks. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola reporting.
Police officials briefed concerned business leaders in Johannesburg on their plan to quell xenophobic violence, which has left 12 people dead over the past week. Police say they have the situation under control, but have not divulged any further information.
It doesn't matter what is the face of criminality. So we arrest people that ban, destroy, kill, injure other people. The number of the people arrested up to this point is 639. And since this thing started going forward, we hope we'll be sending them through the systems, sending them through the prosecution until they reach the final end of the whole chain of criminal justice system.
There's been widespread condemnation of the violence. It has sparked a backlash against South African businesses, especially in Nigeria, where companies such as MultiChoice, Vodacom and MTN have been forced to close their doors temporarily.
So we took a decision to close our retail outlets last week after 4 outlets were damaged in vandalism attacks. And we also closed the head office, but we intend to open it again early this week. It is also a great tragedy in that market that the stores that were damaged are actually franchise stores owned by Nigerian business people.
The South African business fraternity have committed to working with authorities in South Africa and Nigeria to find long-term solutions.
I also want to commend the Nigerian government for acting very swiftly to calm the situation down in the last week. In terms of our engagement with the minister, the engagement was very good. The minister took us through what they've done over the last week to quell the situation down. We are very positive with the work that they are doing, and we sincerely hope that we are at the end of the violence and we will see things returning back to normality.
We had agreed to partner with government on dealing with the issues and the cause or the root cause of what seems to be xenophobic attacks. One was on unemployment, 2 was on gender and children. So if we were to come up with better plans of how to effectively create employment within the South African communities and as a country, we'd actually be dealing much more with growth within Africa.
On one hand, we have the issues around markets and perceptions of shareholders in terms of the business and commercial side. On the other, we have the diplomatic implications and what's going to happen there in terms of relationships between South Africa and its neighbors and the rest of the continent. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's head to Tunisia now. The country has hosted the 16th International Interministerial Conference on South-South Cooperation in the capital, Tunis. Now, the two-day event brought together key sector players to empower the new generation as well as realize demographic dividend. Now, with the details, here's CGTN's Adnan Shaushi.
The Interministerial Conference is organized by the National Board of Family and Population, Partners in Population and Development, PPD, and the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA.
The conference seeks to deliberate and clarify on how the South and triangular corporations can maximize and leverage the health and demographic outcomes. It also contributes to addressing emerging population issues.
The event brought together senior policymakers, leaders of Partners in Population and Development member states, and other developing countries and ministers of health, population, planning, economic and development.
This is a very important interministerial conference for the PPD member states, where we come and share ideas on some of the key population and development issues. And this year it is even more special because we are commemorating the 25th anniversary or birthday of PPD, which was formed in 1994 during the ICPD Program of Action Development in Cairo 25 years ago.
The conference serves as a global platform of dialogue to further support the South-South cooperation approach as an efficient tool to carry out the plan of action of the 1994 ICPD and the SDGs 2030 agenda.
This is an important initiative for developing countries. The headquarters are in Bangladesh. The Chinese delegation was led by Mr. Li Bin, Vice Chairperson of the 13th National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference.
Several consultations and high-level meetings are on the agenda. A call for action in Tunisia were adopted by developing countries, members or non-members of the PPD and representatives of the UN organizations. Participants shed light on the remarkable progress made in advancing the health and rights of women. The outcome of this year's conference will form the basis of a background document containing crucial elements for reflection at the International Conference on Population and Development 25 Nairobi Summit in November 2019. Adnan Shaushi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, European Union's new president-elect, Ursula von der Leyen, has presented her new commission, which she has termed as gender-balanced and geopolitical. Now, during the announcement of key roles, Dutchman Frans Timmermans will be in charge of the European Green Deal, while Margrethe Vestager would be in charge of digital issues. Irishman Phil Hogan, currently in charge of agriculture, will take up the post of Trade Commissioner, and French Defense Minister Sylvie Goulard will be in charge of industrial policy. A new Commission defense branch has also been formed that aims at stemming Europe's waning global influence. The appointed commissioners are expected to take office on November 1st, following the approval from the European Parliament. Now, the co-founder and CEO of e-commerce giant Alibaba is finally stepping down. Last year, Jack Ma announced he will retire on his 55th birthday, while CGTN's Gerald Tan takes a look at his extraordinary career and what lies ahead for China's richest man.
A superstar of Chinese e-commerce, Jack Ma defies conventions. His playful image, like this Michael Jackson-style performance at a company celebration, runs counter to stereotypical CEOs. Yet his journey from English teacher to tech tycoon is one of modern China's best-known success stories. In 1999, Ma co-founded a business marketplace webpage out of his apartment in his hometown Hangzhou. Fast forward 20 years and Alibaba is a global empire, spanning online retail, cloud computing, digital banking, even entertainment. Success, though, didn't come easy for Ma. He failed his college entrance exam twice, got turned down by Harvard University 10 times, and was rejected for 30 jobs after graduation. The no's kept coming when he sought venture capital to back his internet enterprises. But his favorite movie character inspired him to carry on.
That is why when people call me crazy, stupid in the past 17 years, you're crazy, you're doing something that never work. You're stupid, how can you do that model? Amazon this model, eBay this model, why Alibaba this model? I told myself, Forrest Gump said, go ahead, never care about what the other people.
The investors who said no may now be looking back with regret. Alibaba is a multi-billion-dollar behemoth, boasting more than 720 million active users each month. The company is often credited with helping to transform the Chinese economy by giving choice to consumers in rural areas, unlocking the domestic buying power, and spurring the growth of countless small businesses. In 2014, Alibaba shattered records at the New York Stock Exchange. Its initial public offering raised $25 billion, a feat unheard of before or since.
Mr. Ma, good morning, sir.
As the face of Alibaba, Ma lives in the limelight, meeting world leaders, speaking at global forums, and sharing his opinions on a multitude of topics.
Trade war is the most stupid thing in this world. China, young people, the children are always the kings and queens. We have to make them to work like a team.
Ma says he would like to focus on his charities once he steps down as CEO of Alibaba. He's also expressed interest in returning to education where he had his beginning, coming full circle for the man whom many in China respectfully refer to as Teacher Ma. Gerald Tan, CGTN, Washington.
Well, we ended there on today's Africa Live Biz. Now, coming up later on Global Business Africa, inflation in Egypt falls to the lowest level in years. We'll be examining that. All that coming up, top of the hour. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Uche. This is Africa Live. We've got a lot more news coming your way after the break, including a look at the world of Tunisian ceramics, a country contemporary art fair opens.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The first session of the Artistic Ceramic Days of Carthage has opened at the City of Culture in a very festive atmosphere as a sign of celebrations of ceramists. On this occasion, the City of Culture opened all its spaces to welcome exhibitions of artistic ceramics, mainly a number of works made by Tunisian and African artists and foreign craftsmen. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi is there and filed this story.
Several exhibitions offered a selection of various works with modern and traditional inspiration, transforming everyday ceramics into art objects.
I have created modern and very useful objects. The Artistic Ceramic Days of Carthage have revived this sector, which employs thousands of craftsmen and women.
The international event is a journey into the wonders of pottery and ceramics, through which visitors discovered the magic world of clay-textured pearls with rich and varied designs.
The event is very interesting because we meet other ceramists from the whole world. We exchange our experiences and learn new techniques.
Tunisian and foreign artists and students of fine arts have realized an original wall painting which has attracted hundreds of visitors.
Over 30 people have worked on this ambitious artistic project. The giant ceramic painting in downtown Tunis shows our attachment to ceramics, which is a millennial art in our country.
The theatre square of the City of Culture in the Bardo Museum was transformed into Gelela Square in tribute to the Libyan village of Gelela, where potters managed to perpetuate the art of their ancestors by preserving their ancient practice. The closing ceremony of the Artistic Ceramics Days of Carthage was held at the Roman Amphitheatre of Carthage, with a fashion show and dresses inspired by ceramics, as well as a musical concert. The event is a tribute to this noble art. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, we'll see you at the other side of the break with your sports news. Here is a look at the headline. We meet Tunisia's first CAF-appointed female referee, Dorsef Gwenenwati.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every